is social democracy?
It is a manifesto above all else to end austerity. That will be our number one priority.
Well, you've probably heard me argue in the past on democratic socialism and why socialism cannot be democratic. However, for the purpose of this
yes, it can. It can promote liberty.
Argument, I'm going to target that of the Social Democrats. If you go back in history to the 19th century with that of social democracy, what you will discover is that social democracy basically fully supported communism. The revolutionaries of communism believed in achieving things through revolutionary means, in other words, through violence. The Social Democrats believed in achieving things basically through that of parliamentary democracy. When the Soviet Union had came around, there became that split between that of your Social Democrats and that of your militant communists, so to speak. Again, the problem is with that argument though, is that although these Social Democrats that supported communism believed in things through parliamentary democracy, socialism being about central planning contradicts it anyway. The natural state of socialism is it does end in tyranny, so it wouldn't matter whether it was the revolutionaries or not. The Social Democrats would have ended in the same position. With the failure of socialism regarding the economy, this is the very reason why the Social Democrats had began to take on private capital and began to take on markets. More and more people were, driving away from communism, and therefore it was a case that the Social Democrats would take on some form of capitalism. The way to look at that of a Social Democrat today, the very type of people who support some form of socialism, but at the same time they support that of the private sector and that of capitalism to some degree. So they are essentially in support of the mixed economy. And the inevitable consequence of that...
Social Democrats are capitalists. There are democratic socialists, and then there are social democrats. Now, you can be a democratic socialist and still be a social democrat. But if we're talking specifically about a capitalist frame, then yes, social democracy is a capitalist system.
Is that you end up under corporatism. Have a listen to this argument.
He says social democracy, you end up under corporatism, right? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. In fact, social democracy does the complete opposite. Corporatism is when big corporations use their wealth to pay off politicians, to give them tax exemptions and loopholes and deregulations. So I don't know how social democracy does that in any way, shape, or form.
This is Juliana. She's a politics student. Together with her flatmate, Marco, she's talking about social democracy. Marco only had a rough idea about it until now. Juliana explains to him that social democracy is based on three fundamental values: freedom, justice, and solidarity.
Immediately you hear the contradiction, saying liberty and then going on to say social justice and solidarity. Now, to translate what that means, the social justice and solidarity simply means they're going to seek control over the economy in the name of trying to achieve equality. Now, the word control,
I guess you can say that,
is the antithesis of liberty.
Quick point of privilege. Quick point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Guys, first of all, James Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. I just want to say, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum? I'm one of the people who's very, very prone to sensory overload. There's a lot of whispering and chatter going on. It's making it very difficult for me to focus. Please, can we just, I know we're all fresh and ready to go, but can we please just keep the chatter to a minimum? It's affecting my ability to focus. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Okay, is there a speaker again?
I don't know what he's trying to prove. You know what? I'm just gonna wait.
And name, chapter, pronouns.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
You cannot say...
You see, there's a difference between, like, left-wing libertarians, libertarian socialists, and then, like, just straight-up social democrats or democratic socialists. You know, Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist or a social democrat, whatever you want to call him. But he believes in a capitalist framework, right? But he also believes in gun control, and they also, I find that progressives and social democrats tend to believe in a lot of big government policies like the Green New Deal, you know, gun control. Like, at the end of the day, like, you know, if we're talking about a progressive or a democratic socialist in America, at the end of the day, you know, they're a centrist when it comes to authoritarian, libertarian ideology. Like, I agree with, probably, at this point, I agree with probably democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders, 60 to 70% of the issues, maybe 75% of the issues at best. But I would never, like, vote for somebody like Bernie Sanders.
You are for liberty, and then on the other hand, try to control something which is the antithesis of liberty. So,
okay, this guy's trying to, like, act as if anything the government does is completely authoritarian. So if they interfere in any way, shape, or form, it's by definition tyranny. And this is where theory land starts to happen, because this just doesn't make... This is just a straw man, okay? The idea that... I mean, the government has done good things, okay? Medicaid is a good thing. Medicare is a good thing. If those things didn't exist, people wouldn't have health care. You got 45,000 people dying annually from a lack of health care coverage. And then you got 135 million Americans struggling with medical debt being one of the biggest reasons of bankruptcy. So, in a laissez-faire capitalist mind, you know, in order to achieve perfect liberty, you have to let corporations reign. You have to, like, let them do whatever they want with their businesses. And there are two problems with that. One is, I mean, to say that, you're ignoring market failures in history. Like, you can't say the market can regulate itself, because we've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in the United States. We've tried laissez-faire capitalism in the United States for over 145 years. The market can't regulate itself. You get monopolies. You get children working in unregulated factories where their fingers are cut off because there aren't any safeguards on these machines, you know. And we're talking about a system that is promoting, like, I mean, this is wage slavery. Like, there's slavery, then there's wage slavery, and then anything in between. And, I mean, we're talking about 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. The idea of social democracy, or the idea of left-wing libertarianism, is the idea that giving everybody liberty on an individual and economic basis. You know, when you're economically free, you have time. You're not working all the time. You're not working 40 hours a week, and still not making enough for the bare necessities. You know, you're not working. You have time with your loved ones, with your family, your kids. You have time and opportunity to keep on growing. You always have something to fall back on. And the government doesn't just say, oh, well, you had your chance and you blew it. No, they want to give you prosperity on an economic level. A living wage, potentially UBI, free college, universal daycare, family paid and maternal leave, Medicare for all. These are the type of things that will stop financial crises like medical debt, like generation after generation staying poor. You know, if you have the opportunity to better yourself, then you have the opportunity to prosper, and now we would have a playing level field too. So his idea of liberty is let the markets do whatever they want, monopolies all around, businesses can pay whatever they want, and you know what? Either you work or you die. Or luckily you have support. If not, oh well. You see, that's not economic liberty to me. Economic liberty to me is valuing people not by what they make businessmen or CEOs, but valuing them by birth. Just by being alive. You know, collectivizing. We're individuals who need to collectivize in some shape or form to survive. You can't survive as an individual. I don't think any species can. Maybe spiders, but...
For example, what you'll find with that of Social Democrats is they favour controls over the economy, like the minimum wage law, or they seek to control that of how much businesses are earning, etc., etc. And they set the tax agenda on businesses.
Friends, here in Edinburgh, we are surrounded by history. History that offers inspiration for the future. This is the birthplace of the Enlightenment. It was in this city, in our small country on the edge of Europe, that an intellectual flowering transformed the way humanity thinks about the world. Thomas Jefferson, the author of America's Declaration of Independence, wrote this: "So far as science is concerned, no place in the world can pretend to competition with Edinburgh. The contribution Scotland has made to the modern world is unparalleled. That should make us proud, but it should also make us determined. Proud that the Scottish independence movement is defined by progressive, inclusive internationalism. And determined that we will never allow our nation's place in the world to be sacrificed by the likes of Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson."
What you tend to find through social democracy and what Social Democrats want, they demand higher tax rates.
There have been sharp exchanges at Holyrood over plans to introduce a tax on workplace parking. The Conservatives said it was a scheme designed to fleece hard-working families.
Basically, in order to pay for their idea of having a big welfare state, strong social security, socialisation still to some degree, maybe for things like healthcare or education, maybe several other things like roads and pensions, etc. These are things that Social Democrats believe in, and they also believe in that whole climate change garbage that you hear quite often.
We're already seeing extreme weather, the likes of which we've not been used to, greater rainfall, unusually for Scotland, some heat waves in the most recent summer. We are seeing that impact already, and we know that that impact is going to continue. You know, estimates are that even if we minimise emissions, sea levels by the end of the century will rise by around 0.5 metre. And Scotland accounts for more than 10% of Europe's coastline. We have 100 inhabited islands. Many of our iconic industries, fishing and whisky, rely heavily on climate-sensitive natural resources. So the impacts for us, as they will be for countries across the globe, are going to be significant, and that makes it more important that we show real leadership, both in mitigating climate change, but also leading in terms of adaptation as well.
They believe in strong redistribution of wealth.
Scotland, just like the UK as a whole, and indeed other countries around the world, faces deep, interrelated, complex challenges. The deficit is certainly one of those challenges, but so too is boosting productivity, ensuring skilled and well-paid job opportunities, adapting to an ageing population, combating inequality, and moving to the low-carbon age.
There are several examples of social democrats like that of Nicola Sturgeon or Bernie Sanders, Alex Salmond, and many in the Labour Party or across in the Scandinavian economies that you might regard as social democratic countries. Now, I've argued in the past the difference on that of democratic socialism, which is an oxymoron, and the social market economies, which that of the Scandinavian economies are. Now, social democrats would argue for the higher tax.
Scandinavian countries are social democracies. That means they're capitalist nations. I really hope he didn't just say it's that they are a social market.
Tax rates, etc., and the strong government regulation like that of the Scottish National Party, and they favour this of the private sector, but they favour this side of the social justice nonsense, basically the antithesis of liberty, seeking to control the economy, whether it's through minimum wage laws, etc., or laying on regulations on various other things. When you look past all the rhetoric of how they favour this democracy with their social justice, you will come across that of the likes of Nicola Sturgeon, who basically spat in the face of the 55% who voted no in the 2014 referendum, which of course includes myself.
To build support for independence and to make and win the case and build the demand for people in Scotland to have that choice. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about the diktats of a government that has no credibility, no authority, changes its mind every day, and is probably going to be out of office before too long. Instead, I will make the preparations that are within my ability to make right now and make the case for independence.
I voted no to Scottish independence to protect Scotland from the socialists. That was actually the main argument that I made before, that I did not feel comfortable that if Scotland was to separate from the United Kingdom, just look around you to the amount of people there are who utterly despised Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher wasn't perfect, but the reasons for why they hated her was privatisation and deregulation. And you kind of think to yourself, well, hold on a second here. On one hand, you're calling yourself social democrats. You claim to want the private sector, but you despise Thatcher for privatisation. Of course, you do get those who are communists, the flat-out, radical independence campaign, for example. They are a prime example of that.
I've been given this award for standing strongly against Brexit and for strongly supporting the principles, the values of the European Union.
Along with her and that of, Alex Salmond, argued that this was a once-in-a-lifetime vote. Was that ever respected? No. They did not respect our democracy at all. In fact, within the space of a year or two, they were already arguing for a second independence referendum. And then they did the exact same with the European Union referendum. They magically, and this was so predictable, kicked the can down the road by 3 whole years and then came back and said, the people didn't know what they voted for. They didn't know what they voted for. They're too stupid. They're too ill-informed. They didn't know what they voted for. That's the type of arrogance and self-centered attitude that you're getting from these so-called social democrats. Actions speak louder than words. The mixed economy cannot escape corporatism. You cannot escape this because you've got the combination between the public and the private sector. Government will always pick and choose winners and losers. This is what the current British...
So you're basically saying we should just give up. No system, unless you check your government, is gonna work. So everything you're saying could be used with even your ideology, bro.
Economy is. This is what the
Which your ideology incites corporations to just do whatever they want, willy-nilly. Like, again, we're talking about an unregulated market that has proven to have had disastrous results. But we have to ignore market failures in history in order to have our ideology.
European Union is, that the SNP fully support, and they're Social Democrats. They're supporting the corporatism of the European Union. You will always, through this system of social democracy, of trying to combine socialism and capitalism together.
Unless he's using a whole different definition of corporatism, I don't know what he's talking about. Just because he's saying mixed economies are by definition corporatism, that's what it's sounding like to me. But I'm just hoping he's using a different definition, because if he's not, then he's just completely strawmanning and not making any sense.
Through the means of social justice, what you see is a government that grows bigger and bigger over time. Now, this even applies to Scotland. Let's just imagine for a second that Scotland's separated from the United Kingdom. Over a slow and gradual time period, the government becomes bigger and bigger and becomes ever more intrusive in people's lives. An example of that was the SNP trying to impose the Named Persons Act. In today's Britain, it has become more and more authoritarian because of this social justice. The social justice where freedom of speech becomes a thing of the past. The best one yet, here's a social democrat for...
That's not a social democratic policy, bro. What? He thinks what is he thinking? Like social democrats are like statist communists who just are left-wing authoritarians? No, I don't even know how to respond to this, because it's what are you trying to say? There's left-wing authoritarians that are democratic socialists, but the idea that all of them think that way, or majority of them think that way, that's not true. That just makes you an authoritarian.
Or you, Joe Swinson, listen to this.
The first task is clear. We must stop Brexit. We are crystal clear. A Liberal Democrat majority government will revoke Article 50 on day one.
The illiberal anti-democrats preach of how they stand for democracy and liberty, but there they are, spitting in the face of the people. I would go as far as to argue that eventually you'll end up in a stage where people will start to argue more and more for socialism, to say, oh look, here's where private sector is failing, here's why private ownership needs to be done away with. And if you want a prime example of that, I had a comment earlier from a boy who was a member of UKIP who was arguing to nationalise that of transportation, because the problem is with the mixed economy is the social democracy. The private sector ends up with these monopolies and cartels and the extremely expensive costs in the private sector and failure in the private sector because of
monopolies and cartels. Jesus Christ, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. You know, monopolies wouldn't be a thing if the government never stepped in. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Competency because of government's intervention. So what do the socialists have ammunition to do? The socialists have ammunition to start demanding for more and more and more socialism. And you will hear through this of arguments by Secular Talk, I think his name is, or there's another one, David Packman. These are YouTubers who argue for universal health care. And that's what these social democrats are arguing for. It's like arguing more and more socialism. Oh, the private sector's not working, so we need more socialism.
The private sector is not working. 45,000 people die annually from a lack of healthcare coverage. 135 million people are struggling with medical debt. People who are working a minimum wage job, 88% of them are 20. Okay? 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and half of us are making 30 grand or less a year. What are you talking about? Okay? When the government fails, when the free market fails, the government is supposed to step in to help people out. But instead, you want to live in this fairyland where charity and voluntarism works, which we can't even surpass $500 billion in charity. But somehow we're going to make it work, right? No, you're just being selfish. And you ignore market failures in history.
And I've argued in the past, and you can check out a video that I've done in the past on Keynesian economics, and I've explained the problem with it. Anyway, folk.
Yeah, like you explained in specific detail. You showed us all the data as to why Scandinavian countries are doing so bad, right?
Thank you for watching my video and of course listening. If you like the video, be sure to like it, share the video, favourite and whatnot, and of course get any questions, comment in the comment section below and I'll be sure to get back to you.
Okay, so I stumbled upon this mouth diarrhea earlier today, right? And I watched it like halfway through before I was like, yeah, I have to debunk this man. So we literally just spent like 15 minutes, 30 seconds on this guy, right? Has he gone into specific detail as to why Medicare for All would fail? Did he go into why a living wage doesn't work? Has he debunked any specific social democratic policy in his video? No. He has given us pure opinion and pure theory. This guy thinks social democracy is corporatism, guys. Like, come on. Let's get real, okay? He's the type of person, like, this is the problem with laissez-faire capitalists. By definition, government is bad. You can't have government interfere in any way, shape, or form, despite the fact that government has done good. Government has done good. And to ignore that, to call government inherently evil, it's just straw manning and you're just lying and you're just wrong. Okay? Like I said earlier, no matter what system you have, unless you check your government, nothing is going to happen and they're always going to dick you around until you finally bully them into giving you what you want. You see, this guy, it's just Theoryland, man. It's Theoryland. He wants to live in a world where people are dying from some douchebag businessman putting in cheap parts into a car to save a few bucks. And he doesn't want that person to be exposed until enough people die where Yelp finally gives them a 1 star and they're like, oh, well, too many people died. Please don't go there. After 9 months of him getting away with literal murder. But, I mean, to be fair, he's not an ANCAP, but, I mean, these are how some people work. Okay? And this is Theoryland, man. He didn't go through anything. He didn't go through any specific policy and break down, show us the data, show us the studies. He didn't do any of that. This was all just pure opinion. Okay? He should change his whole YouTube. He should just say libertarian views. No, libertarian opinions. That's what he should say. But this was bad. Usually I'm a little bit more civil, if you even want to call it that, but this guy was just so, like, misleading and just so strawmanish. Like, I want to debate this guy, and in fact, when I'm done with this video, I'm going to attach it to his video right here, so that he knows that somebody debunked him. And if you do happen to see this, Scotty, please let's make time for a debate, because what you're saying is just opinionated and untrue. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm gonna go puke.